Hey guys, welcome to Traditional Bow Hunting Wilderness Podcast. This is Jason Samkoviak. Today we're going to ask kind of the ultimate question here, which is, you heard which came first, the chicken or the egg. Well, today we're going to talk about which is more important, the bow or the arrow, okay? Which one is the most valuable part of the equation? Which one is the most important? Which one matters, okay? Well, I'm here to tell you that it is not the bow. It is your arrows. This is crucial. These are everything. What if I were to tell you that the right or wrong arrow can make up for 10 pounds of bow weight that you're shooting? Let that sink in. And I'm not kidding with that. That's 100% legit. 10, even probably 15 pounds of bow weight you can get away with less by shooting the correct arrow. Shoot the wrong arrow and you might need 10 or 15 more pounds of bow weight to accomplish the same thing as that you did with a lighter bow and the same kind of arrow. So let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, put my bow down there. When it comes to the bow has one job. Transfer X amount of energy into the arrow. That's all a bow does, okay? It just puts the energy it has, in my case, 57 pounds at my 26-inch draw, puts 57 pounds of energy into that arrow. If the arrow will take it, I should actually rephrase that. My bow will send 57 pounds of energy, we're using unscientific terms, but 57 pounds of energy into the string of my bow, okay? That's what it'll do. When I let go, 57 pounds of energy transfers into my string. That string, from those limbs pulling that string forward, wants to transfer 57 pounds of energy into this arrow. Will the arrow handle 57 pounds of energy? Okay, that's our question. That's our goal, to get all 57 pounds, or whatever your bow weight is of energy, we're just going to call it mine, 57, to get 57 pounds of energy into this. Why? Because if this carries 57 pounds, when it gets downrange and it hits that animal, it can transfer as much of that 57 pounds. Again, I'm not getting scientific and talking about lost feet per second in flight and all that, but in a perfect world, we'll give it 57 pounds of energy from the bow. It will carry 57 pounds of energy to the animal and transfer that energy into penetration and passing through that animal. That is the goal. If this arrow cannot absorb 57 pounds, we have a problem. Okay, if I only get 45 pounds of energy transferred to this arrow and the rest of it is lost in noise coming out of the bow, and because of the arrow not being heavy enough to hold the weight of that bow transferring that energy into it, we have a problem. We're inefficient. We're not getting the most out of this arrow and bow transfer combination. Now, there's also a lot to do with the structure of this arrow and what it does, which we are going to cover here in a minute for you. But let's stick with that for a second. So, what makes an arrow capable of trapping that kind of energy from that bow? The rule has always kind of been 9 grains per pound minimum. I prefer a 10 grain per pound minimum. Actually, mine are 12.63. I had to just look it up because I was making another video earlier on shooting 40-something pound bows, and I couldn't remember what my grain per pound was on this. Well, I'm at 12.65 grains per pound. I'm shooting a 720 grain arrow, and I'm shooting it out of a 57 pound bow. That makes it, my grains per pound is 12.6 basically, or 12.7 grains per pound. Grains per pound is calculated as for every pound of draw weight you have in your bow, when you're when you're maxed out on your draw weight, it's how many grains of arrow weight per each of those pounds. So let's say, for example, we wanted to build an arrow at 10 grains per pound, which is a very functional arrow, okay? 10 grains per pound is what I consider a good arrow weight. If you're shooting a 57 pound bow, 10 grains per pound would be a 570 grain arrow. If you're shooting a 45 pound bow, 10 grains per pound would be a 450 grain arrow. Okay? If you're shooting a 70 pound bow, 700 grains would be a 10 grain per pound arrow. So you see, mine being 720 makes it 12.7 grains per pound is where it's at. But when you have an arrow of 10 grains per pound or more, it has the capabilities, or technically they say 9 will do it also, but for me I like a little heavier. The heavier arrow you're shooting, the more energy gets to that arrow, the less noise you get out of your bow. There's a lot of advantages to heavy arrows, and that's for a whole nother topic. I think I've done videos on it, but we want at least a minimum, in my opinion, of 9 grains per pound or 10 grains per pound. So that's going to give you enough mass in this arrow to take that energy from that bow, and when it hits and you draw that back and you come in and you shoot and you let go, boom, that arrow is going to bend and flex and do its do the paradox and do all this stuff, but it has enough mass to let that string, you got two basic, put it simple terms kind of thing. You have an arrow here, which is basically a wall, okay? It's almost something, it's an object that you're going to try and move. The string is going to try and move this. And basically, if that arrow is too light, that thing is just going to ping and it's gone, and then you just got this lost energy. It didn't get to throw all the energy in there. But if you take that arrow and you have it, and that arrow's heavier, it can't just swoop and send it out there. It has to and push and get it there, and when it does, it's put all that energy into that arrow. Not just pushed a little bit of its energy just to get rid of the arrow. It's putting it all into that arrow up front. Okay, it's the whole power stroke, but that initial hit, when it's a light arrow, that initial hit moves it, and the string has to try to keep getting that energy in there through the end of it. If it's heavier, it's going to move slower, and it's going to absorb that energy from that string, and then it's going to carry it out there. So we want that weight to that arrow. Okay, again, you don't have to get super extreme and be up there in the, in the 12, 13 range, but a 10 grains per pound is a good area to start with, especially if you're trying to balance trajectory and that kind of thing, because the heavier the arrow is, it's going to go slower. There's no two ways about it. But if you're, we're close range. If you're, I don't care where you're hunting at or what you're doing. If you're thinking 35-yard shots are acceptable on animals, we are in two different camps. I will never shoot at any animal on this planet at 35 yards. It's just not going to happen. I'm 20 yards and under for everything I do. And if I can't get inside of 20 yards, maybe that's 23 because I misjudged, but if I can't get inside there, I'm not taking a shot. It's just not going to happen. That's me. You do what you want to do. For me, I want an arrow that will absorb all of that arrow or that bow's energy. So that's step one. Okay, we get that, we're off to a great start. Next thing is how the arrow is set up, the tuning of that arrow. So we bare shaft tune and we paper tune. And our goal is to get this arrow to recover from paradox as quick as possible and to fly straight. Now the feathers here will do that. That is their goal, is to help stabilize that. You see I use small feathers, okay? In the old days, you go back 10 years ago, we used a 5 3/4 inch long, so an almost 6 inch long feather with a high back design on it, so that it would, the thought was that we were shooting wood arrows, and as you shot them, or even aluminum, but they would stabilize quick, and that feather would control it, and it would keep that arrow flying true. And it did, and it worked well. It slowed the arrow down a lot. It had some issues with it. It wasn't a fail-safe for arrow correction, because then when you shot in wet weather, your feathers would get matted down. Now your arrow would do all sorts of weird stuff, and the broadhead would start planing and taking over, especially if you're shooting like a lower FOC area, which is forward of center weight. Okay, see, I shoot 31% FOC. So look at where my balance point is on that arrow, okay? That's, see where that's at, all that point weight, look at that, okay? So that's 31% FOC that I'm shooting, which is tremendous, huge. But when you're getting into that 10, 12, so if you got a cedar arrow and you just got a 125 grain head glued on there, nothing wrong with that setup, they work fantastic. But once your feathers get matted down, or your feathers, you need more feather to steer, or that broadhead wants to take over, because that shaft is more equally weighted from front to back. Think of it as like a dart, okay? If you have a paper airplane and you throw a paper airplane, it kind of just floats level and does its thing. When you take a dart and you throw a dart, it doesn't matter if you flip it or what you do, it's going to always kind of center out, okay? It may fly, flip, and then go in that way, but it will straighten itself out because it has forward to center weight. All the weight is in the front, okay? I do the same thing with my arrows. Now, because of that, weight leads. So the back of my arrow is kind of worthless. The front is doing, this part from here to here is my whole arrow. Okay, this is what does all the work. The only reason I even have any of that on there is just because I need to be able to draw it all the way back. But this part of my arrow is what does everything. This drives, leads, all that stuff. I don't even need feathers, not even with a broadhead. And you've seen that if you watch videos I did a couple videos three, four years ago where I was shooting a bare shaft with a big 1.5 inch wide Magnus broadhead on there, and I was drilling it, bare shaft. Don't recommend you do that until you've proven your setup works, because you do that with an arrow without high FOC, and that thing might actually turn sideways and go stick in a wall or go stick somewhere else, because the broadhead will take control. With high FOC, my arrow is in control the whole thing. It's overpowering, so it doesn't let that broadhead plane and do what it wants to. It takes over. So I don't even need feathers. I use a custom, I chop my own, but these are a 3 1/4 inch long feather in a semi-high back position. They're not as high as the big high back ones we used to, but they're higher than a standard one. These are almost 3/4 of an inch high. Just a smidge, you know, maybe a 1/16 or so, or maybe 2/16 under 3/4 of an inch tall for these feathers. So, but they're higher than standard, which I like, because then when I shoot it, I get this big ball, like you're seeing right there, of feathers flying, going right towards the target. So I get that whole golf ball look as this thing spins. Whoop, I get that whole, it looks like a green golf ball going there, and I like that. But you want that high FOC on there. So when you have that arrow weight, you have the higher FOC, and you get that set up right, you get a lot of advantages. But the tuning, regardless of what your forward to center is or what you're doing, that arrow has to be tuned well. Bare shaft tuned, so tuned without the feathers. Make sure that shaft is flying so that when you shoot, and you shoot that thing, you're not going tail high, you're not going tail low, you're not going right spine, left spine, which you'll have to look for right and left-handed shooters if it's weak, or you know, if it's a weak spine, tail left or tail right. I honestly don't remember, because I've been shooting the same arrows forever. Now, when I shoot them, fortunately, all my bows for the last 8 years have been the same weight, so I don't ever have to mess with this stuff. I shoot them through paper a couple times a year and make sure it's all good and nothing's changed, but for the most part, I haven't bare shaft tuned in a while. I still shoot bare shafts, but they're flying exactly like they were when I set them up, so I don't remember which way is which, okay? But you want to Google it and learn for bare shaft tuning what it is, so that you can tune that arrow to your shooting style and the way you shoot and how that bow and what your release is, to make sure that that arrow flies completely as straight as possible. When it does, you are now ready to build your arrow and get that thing set up, because now you've already proven the arrow will fly with a field tip and bare shaft good, and you have that all dialed in, you have your knock point set, everything is perfect aligned. Now you put feathers on there for the fail-safe stuff, to help control with a broadhead, to help it control when it's, you know, when you got a broadhead in there in the rain and you're going to get a little matted down, you'll still have enough control. But that is going to give you the ultimate combination of an arrow that will fly in most of these different kind of weather conditions and make it happen. Now, when you go with an arrow with high FOC, you don't need a lot of feather on the back. And the less you can get away with, the better, because the higher the FOC, weight forward is, then the more you'll get some tail whip on this. I've also done videos on that. I did a lot of these years ago, so they're on my channel. You dig into them. But I shot out here at that deer target from 25 yards here, and you can watch that thing in a tremendous wind. You watch that arrow do this all the way, and it hits perfectly, and it goes right in there. Now, is it hitting that target straight on? No. It comes in and it boom, and it does this, you know, but it's getting there. And you know, it's hitting where it's supposed to. Where if it wasn't high FOC, it might have flew a little straighter, but that wind would have pushed that whole arrow off course. Being high FOC, it doesn't matter what the tail does. This is my whole arrow, and this part of it, it doesn't care what the back's doing, it's going where it's supposed to. And so it works. Now, you want that arrow to hit that target as straight as possible, so that it's not giving up any energy trying to wiggle its way into that animal by wobbling. But I would prefer high FOC setup that's going to put that point there, even if the wind kicks the back off a little bit, and my bow poundage being enough that it will drive that and get it in there, rather than have it be a less FOC arrow that might fly just a titch straighter in high wind, but it's going to be off course as the arrow blows off. So all little things that we need to take into consideration. But it kind of shows you how this little thing right here is so critical. This is everything. Again, your bow, the only thing your bow has to do is put 57 pounds of energy into this. That is the only thing this has to do for me. For whatever your bow weight is, your bow weight. But that's the only thing I expect out of this. Transfer 57 pounds into this. Let this do the rest of it. So your arrow is by far the most critical piece of equipment you have. Your broadhead selection matters on that too. The more resistance you have on a broadhead, the less penetration you're going to get, the more fight you're going to have to get to push through there. The less FOC you have, the more fight you're going to have to put through there. Read the Ashby studies. Watch his videos, okay? I don't have time to go into all the different elements of that, but there are so many things, even to the stiffness of the shaft on an FOC, high FOC versus not high FOC. And see, when you have the weight up front, weight leads. It's like tying a string on a rock and throwing a rock. The string just follows behind, a rock does it all. Okay, and when that hits, that's their setup here. When this hits, it's pulling weight. Okay, it's not pushing. The weight is pulling the back of the shaft rather than weight being evenly distributed and pushing. If weight is evenly distributed more throughout the shaft than up front, then when this hits, you got a lot of weight back here, and that's going to cause this shaft to bend. Whoa, 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 whoa. And it's going to keep doing this as it tries to go through that hole. Okay, it's fighting, almost like Archer's paradox. We want that arrow evened out and smooth as it hits that animal. Well, if you don't have high FOC, and again, I'm not saying that a non-high FOC arrow is bad, but it is so much less efficient, because as it hits that target, then what happens is you have more weight back here. Well, when the front stops, the back wants to keep moving, so it's going to start flexing, and then it has to fight its way through one hole and wiggle through like this to try and get in there. And that's a problem for it. Where if you are high FOC, all of your weight is here. This is just trailing, but then that pushes through and it just keeps right on going. Think of it like this. Think of a semi-truck that's empty. Okay, if you have a semi-truck, so you got the main truck, or the tractor as we call it, and you got a box on the back, and the box is empty. If that thing smashes into rows of brick walls, okay, the front end is where all the weight is, and it will just keep going boom, 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 boom through these layers of walls, and that back end is just following right behind it. The trailer just follows straight behind it, no problem. If you have a fully loaded back end, when the front hits, that back end is going to smack sideways and bounce and try to fight and crash and keep going through there like that. Same concept, okay? Forward to center weight has major advantages to it. So the more correctly you set up this arrow to be as functional and efficient as possible, the more benefit you get out of your bow. That's the whole purpose of this. Spend more time thinking about this than thinking about your bow. Your bow does nothing but transfer X amount of energy to here. This is your weapon. This is your golden ticket right here. This is what accomplishes the harvest. Okay, it's not the bow. And if you were shooting a 65-pound bow with an inefficient arrow setup, you may not get the penetration you think you did, and you'll be mad. It's like it used to be in the old days. Here, you go back 20 years ago, people shot 60, 65, 70-pound bows regularly, and the norm was you had to shoot a 65 or 60-pound bow was expected to try and get the penetration. It was because we knew so little about these. We just thought this was just a device that carried a broadhead. It's not. This is so much more. We know that now. Okay, that information is available to us. Without putting the time and effort into this, you are wasting the potential of your bow. So let your arrows be one of the most important things that you consider on how you construct it and build it. Doesn't matter if it's wood, aluminum, carbon, you have all these different things. My arrow is completely unique setup, okay, for me. Some of you guys might see that here. It's a 500 spine arrow, okay? Oh my God, you're shooting 57 pounds with a 500 spine arrow. It's way under spine. You're wrong. No, I'm not wrong. Did I not just tell you I know what I'm doing tuning, and I paper tune, and I bare shaft tune? I am shooting a custom insert that is 3 inches long on a 27-inch arrow. Okay, but my inserts, I make them myself. They are that long in there, and they are 200 grains. They are 2 brass ones. I grind the lip off, mount them backwards. I've done videos on this, and I show it to you. But I am shooting a custom-made 3-inch, 200-grain insert, a 120 or 100-grain brass or stainless steel. We're shooting a 200-grain 3-inch long brass insert, custom made. I am shooting a 100 grain broadhead adapter with a 160 grain glue-on tip on there. Okay, that's my setup on here. I have 450 grains up here, basically. You know, so I mean, you're talking a lot of weight on the front of this arrow. So it's quite the setup here. 460 grains, right, is right here. 460 grains in that spot of this arrow. Okay, that is peak efficiency. 460 grains right there. So out of a 720 grain arrow. So let your arrow be the most powerful part of your tool. It needs to be your equation here. So set them up right, take the time to tune them, make sure everything is spot on. Not only will they shoot better for you and where you're looking, you hear people say, oh, this bow shoots exactly where I'm looking. The bow doesn't shoot where you're looking. It's irrelevant. The arrow does. Because if your arrow's over spine, it's going to shoot one way. If it's under spine, it's going to shoot the other way. Okay, you're going to have all these issues that happen. The bow doesn't shoot where you're looking. The arrow, how you match it to that bow, puts the arrow where it goes. The bow does one job, sends in one direction, 57 pounds. That's all it does. This does your left, your right, your high, your low, your tuning, your everything is in here. It's not in the bow. So give your arrows a lot more respect than a lot of you guys have been, because you got to understand what these things do for you. So thanks for watching.